Our ancient reading today is taken from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. When God began to create the heavens and the earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
So welcome, everybody. And we've just heard an ancient word from Genesis, verses 1 through 5. And I can say that this passage is perfect for today because it's about beginning all over again. That's what this passage is about. It says, when God began to create the heavens and the earth. Another translation says, in the beginning, right? That's what we might be more familiar with. And it says, well, I'll talk about that later. I have to say one thing before I really dive into the sermon, and that is that choosing a passage for a sermon can be a risky thing. Because when I chose it, I had an idea in mind. My idea was, since in our Bible study this summer, we're kind of going back to the beginning of Bible study and talking about what it is and how we do it, I thought, well, let's just go to the beginning of the Bible for worship. And I thought, oh, light, let there be light. This is a good idea. But that's not what happened, as you'll see. So this text is a text about explaining. It's about trying to explain how things came to be the way they are. It's a poem in the Hebrew. It's a piece of liturgy, a worship response, chant and response. So when we read it in English, all those factors don't come to us in the same way. But there's a couple key points here. This passage, some people, many scholars, think that it is related to some of the other ancient Near Eastern creation stories. And it may or may not be. The jury is out and people are saying different things. Most say it is. But one of the great things about the creation stories, almost all of them, have creation coming out of a great ocean, the deep, the abyss. And that's where all the material for life comes from. And that's going to happen in our story today. So in this passage, God is the sole creator of the cosmos. And that is in contradistinction to most of the ancient Near Eastern myths where there are multiple gods interacting to bring about. And sometimes it is the body of a god who is killed and torn apart that is used to make the universe. Not so in God's way of creating. There's no murder and mayhem here. In some ways, it's a story about order and chaos. And if we think about who was recording this passage and what their situation was and what their purpose in recording it was, it might help us think about that order and chaos. It is most likely that this text was written down in this form while the leaders of Judah were in exile in Babylon. Their entire world had been overthrown. They were in a situation of chaos. And they were declaring, as they wrote this, that our God, who is still our God who is still our God, creates order. Now, just for purposes of scholarship, I just want to mention that one reason this is one of my favorite passages is when I was right in the beginning of studying the Hebrew language in seminary, I learned that there's an important phrase in here, tohu wabohu. And this word, it's two separate words, tohu and bohu is what it means. And tohu, that word by itself, is used 20 times in the Hebrew Bible, many times in Isaiah. But the word bohu is only used 3 times, and that one is always with tohu. So there's this phrase, tohu wabohu. The other 2 passages for the scholars among us are in Isaiah and Jeremiah. And there's been much debate over what these words mean. In my Hebrew class, we talked about it meaning something like flotsam and jetsam, or mishmash. Everything was just all mixed up. But if we look at the word tohu in the larger scriptures, it can mean one of 3 things, typically. Can have a little nuance, of course. One of them is desert. One of them is describing the situation that places are in. And one is, and those places are deserted and dry. They're empty of what gives life meaning. There's no people there. And the third one is a situation, any kind of situation where something that you expect to be there is lacking. Now, the passage, somehow God began to create the heavens and the earth. It says here the earth was complete chaos. That word chaos is translating tohu wabohu. And we might wonder, where did this chaos come from? Did God create that chaos? Or did it come before creation? It's not clear. This text is ambiguous in ways that we might not expect. So we've got this tohu wabohu, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters, or the Spirit of God. Now, for a long time, Christians said that God created everything out of nothing. There was a phrase for it, creatio ex nihilo, everything out of nothing. God is responsible for absolutely everything. But if we look at this as taming chaos and we wonder, was the chaos already here? I mean, it says, darkness covered the face of the deep. Had God created the deep, or was the deep already there? It's just not clear. And this idea of taming chaos, this almost contradictory idea, is the one I landed on for today. In this view, creation is a process. It's a process whereby God, working with the deep, develops everything. The deep in Hebrew is called tehom, and this word is used many times in the Bible, and it usually means the deep, but it sometimes refers to the ocean or a sea or something like that. But it can mean bottomless chaos. You can't get to the bottom of this chaos. So what are we going to do? And this is where the text started to speak to me about our own time. So it's about grief. It's about grief. It's about facing what we have lost. It's about facing what we hoped for that never came. It's about facing our grief not only for ourselves, but our world, our whole community, all the people of the earth, which according to this text, God created all the people. But it also means a fresh start. It means that we take a dive into that deep, into that chaos, and we come up for breath again. Now, we might, in that chaos, meet a monster. We might meet a monster. But that monster, was it created by God? There are other passages in the Bible where God creates the great sea monster. So those monsters, they're somehow part of our whole being. And this passage teaches us that God's way is not to fear the monster and run away, not to experience it as a threat, but to develop a relationship with that monster. There's no violence here. God doesn't in any way damage or destroy that monster. It's just there. It's there to be met and encountered, reckoned with, and then we come back up for air. Maybe that monster has some power and we can use that power. We can share that power. Or maybe that monster has something to tell us. So, in this deep, in this Tehom, we are experiencing this creation of order out of chaos. I was thinking the other day about how some people in dream interpretation will say that the water in your dream is your unconscious. And so Jungian scholars will explore the deep as what's going on inside ourselves that we need to meet and come to terms with. One of the curious things about this passage is that there's a tension here that is never resolved. So God began to create, God created everything, but then there's this chaos. Did God create the chaos, or was the chaos already there? Well, the Israelites weren't concerned about those questions. In fact, they found that thinking about God as the creator of everything on the one hand and talking about what that might mean, and thinking about chaos as pre-existing on the other hand, think about that and what that might mean. Think about God as the creator of chaos. What might that mean? Fruitful places to think. So there's no need in the Israelite tradition to resolve this tension. One thing that does happen here over the course of many verses is that chaos is somehow restrained. But we never hear of chaos being destroyed, which leaves us knowing that chaos can return. And this is part of what the scribes who were in Babylon were knowing, that chaos had been tamed, but now it was here again. There's an important kind of prayer in the Bible that we don't spend a lot of time with, and that's called lament. There are many places where the people lament something in their individual lives, something in their community, something in their country, in their tribe, in their family. There's many causes for lament, probably all of them familiar to us. And we tend to avoid it. And Catherine Keller called this avoiding the chaos, avoiding that monster, avoiding dealing with those factors, could be called tehomophobia, I just love that. We've got the tehom, the deep, and now we have tehomophobia. And she encourages us instead to cultivate tehomophilia, love of the deep, to love those parts of ourselves that seem unlovable, those parts of each other that we don't understand, to love those places where all is not well. Because cultivating this love is to cultivate kind of the foundations of our understanding of God and our Christian traditions. Cultivating this love, even for the deep. There's an undertow. We can go down there and get pulled in. We can even be drawn toward despair. Despair is not quite the same thing as lament, because lament is saying, I see you, I know what's going on, and I'm not leaving, but I'm not going to be overtaken by you. It's a matter, I suppose, of trusting a process that comes maybe from God, or maybe from something in our human psyches, a process that can recognize that even though all is not well in this moment, that like God saw, it was good, that life as life is good. One thing that happens when we dive into that deep, when we place ourselves, when we allow ourselves an awareness of what troubles us, what troubles someone we love, what troubles our community here at the church, or what troubles any of the people around us. When we allow ourselves that and come back to the surface, that is where we find hope. Because we learn that by sharing, by speaking, by acknowledging these things, we start to see a new possibility, a new way in relationship to our favorite monsters. One thing this passage tells us is that life is a creative risk. Just being alive is a creative risk. Just being a friend, a part of a community, just being a friend of a dog or a tree, just being a friend of someone you've never seen. These are risks. But as we take our deep dives and as we reemerge, we see that these creative risks are our best expressions of hope. Let's take a chance. Amen.